They said humans were extinct. Their bones had turned to dust long before the Ethran dominion rose to power. To Queen Leora, that extinction was proof of what she had always believed. Emotion was weakness, and weakness had no place in the stars. Humans, she would say, her silver eyes gleaming beneath the cold lights of her throne room, were creatures who feared their own shadows. They burned bright and died foolishly. Her council always laughed. The stories of Earth, their music, their wars, their courage, were now nothing more than romantic myths whispered by scholars. Queen Leora was no dreamer. She was a conqueror. Her fleet stretched across 7 systems, her rule absolute. The Ethran were beings of crystal and reason, born in laboratories of light. They did not feel. They calculated. Their cities glittered in perfect silence, and even joy had been reduced to mathematics, and yet, on the edge of the galaxy, where stars flickered like dying candles, fate decided to remind her that legends never die quietly. The Eclipsera, her flagship, was crossing the Rim Nebula when it struck. A storm unlike any recorded before, an energy surge wild and alive tore through space like a scream. Control vanished. Engines failed. The sky itself turned into shards of purple fire. "Stabilize the core," her captain shouted. But before the words left his mouth, the ship cracked apart. Leora felt the pull of gravity twist her bones as alarms blared and metal screamed. Her last sight was her reflection on shattered glass. Calm, beautiful, terrified. Then everything went black. When she awoke, silence. Her body ached. The air felt heavy, thick with warmth. She tried to rise, but pain lanced through her ribs. The ceiling above her was low, made of old metal and human design. Primitive, rusted, real. Then came a voice. "Easy now. You're safe." It was deep, roughened by exhaustion, but human. Her breath caught. Impossible. Her eyes flicked open wider, and there he was. A man, flesh and bone, kneeling beside her. His uniform was torn, his hands smeared with oil, his gaze tired but gentle. He looked like something out of an ancient archive photograph. "You're awake," he said, relief softening his face. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." Leora stared, unable to speak. Her mind screamed denial. Humans were extinct. They were myths. And yet here one stood. Alive, breathing, real. He noticed her confusion and smiled faintly. "I'm Elias," he said, offering a hand. "Don't worry, I'm not a ghost." She didn't take it. Her instincts told her to recoil, to analyze, to command. But her heart, something long dormant, simply listened. His voice carried warmth she'd never heard before, like sunlight through glass. He gestured toward a flickering heater and a few salvaged instruments. "You crashed hard," he explained. "I found your pod half buried in the sand. You were barely breathing." Her throat tightened. "You saved me?" He nodded once. Seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing. Such an absurd phrase. Her people had erased that concept centuries ago. There was only logic, not morality. Yet this man, this fragile creature, had risked his life to rescue an enemy he didn't know. "Why?" she asked quietly. He shrugged. "Because you needed help." No grand speech. No demand, just because. For the first time in her long reign, Queen Leora didn't know how to respond. Outside, lightning flashed across the rim's horizon, painting the metallic shelter in hues of violet and gold. Inside, a queen from the stars and a man from a lost world sat in silence, 2 beings divided by eons, bound by something neither could name yet. And though she didn't realize it then, that storm, the one that had nearly destroyed her, had also brought her salvation. Because from that moment on, the queen who laughed at human legends would begin to live one. The days that followed blurred together like shifting light across broken glass. Queen Leora, once the most powerful being in 7 star systems, now sat inside a metal shelter built from scraps and stubbornness. Elias worked tirelessly, moving through the wreckage like he'd done it all his life. His tools were crude, his resources meager, yet his precision was astonishing. Every motion had purpose, every repair done with care. Leora watched in silence, her pride caught somewhere between fascination and disbelief. The human sang quietly while soldering wires together, soft melodies haunting and beautiful. She had never heard someone sing outside of ritual simulations. The sound stirred something unquantifiable in her. It was warmth. One evening, as the storm raged beyond the shelter's shield, she finally spoke. "How long have you been here?" Elias didn't look up. "About 8 months, I think. Hard to tell without proper suns. Alone?" "Yeah." He smiled faintly, tightening a bolt. "Not the first time, though." Leora's gaze narrowed. "You survived. On this planet? Without command or technology?" He shrugged, as though survival were the simplest thing in the world. "You adapt. Humans are good at that." "Adapt," she repeated softly, tasting the unfamiliar pride in his tone. For the Ethran, adaptability was chaos. Perfection came from control. Yet this man with no empire or army had lived where her fleets would have perished. He didn't need crystal armor or nano-weapons. He needed only determination and hope. That night, as thunder rolled outside, Elias set a small metal dish between them. Steam rose from a strange gray stew. "It's not royal cuisine," he joked, "but it'll keep you alive." Leora hesitated. Her people absorbed energy directly from their nutrient spheres. Clean, cold, sterile. But this smelled real, tangy, smoky, alive. She took a tentative sip. Her eyes widened. "It has flavor," Elias laughed. "That's kind of the point." The sound of his laughter startled her. It was unrestrained, imperfect, alive. It made the small shelter feel less like a prison and more like something she hadn't known she missed. Home. Later, as he worked on the broken transmitter, she found herself asking questions she never thought she would. "Why do you keep going?" He looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You're stranded. You have no way off this world. Yet you keep fighting, repairing, hoping. What drives you?" He leaned back, thinking for a long moment before answering. "Because if you stop trying, you stop being human. Hope's the only thing they can't take from you." Hope. That word echoed inside her like an ancient bell. Her species had purged hope from their DNA long ago, calling it a distraction. But now, watching this tired man mend broken things with steady hands, she wondered if perhaps hope was not weakness but the secret to endurance. That night, as the heater flickered low, Leora lay awake listening to the storm. Elias's words lingered in her mind. His simplicity wasn't ignorance, it was strength disguised as gentleness. She could see it now. The spark in his eyes when faced with failure, the quiet resolve that asked for nothing but gave everything. When morning came, she found him asleep at his workbench, tools scattered, exhaustion etched into his face. She reached out, almost unconsciously, and brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. His skin was warm, so alive, her hand trembled. Emotion, raw and real, surged through her. Fear, awe, curiosity, things she hadn't felt since her creation. Humans, she whispered to herself, were not myths after all. Outside, the storm began to fade, and sunlight spilled through the cracks in the shelter. Inside, something even more impossible began to grow. Trust. The queen of reason had met the man of heart. And somewhere in the ruins of the galaxy's edge, a legend long forgotten began to breathe again. The rim storms grew worse with every passing day. The ground trembled beneath the shelter. Lightning carved the horizon in silver veins, and even the air began to hum with energy. Elias worked faster now, salvaging parts, repairing the transmitter, pushing himself beyond exhaustion. Queen Leora watched silently, torn between admiration and an emotion she couldn't yet name. He was fading. She could see it in the hollows of his cheeks, the bruises beneath his eyes, the tremor in his hands. Yet he smiled every morning, greeted her with the same words, "Still breathing, Your Majesty?" and pretended not to notice how her gaze lingered on him longer each time. When the power cells failed completely, the shelter plunged into darkness. Leora rose from her cot, her crystalline veins glowing faintly in the black. "We need light," she said. Elias chuckled softly, rubbing his temples. "You glow, I fix things. We make a decent team." It was meant as a joke, but something in the way he said we made her chest tighten. A human and a queen, an absurd pair holding out against a hostile galaxy. As the hours crawled, Elias continued to tinker with the communicator. Sparks flared, smoke hissed, but he didn't stop. Leora moved closer, her curiosity finally breaking her silence. "You risk your life for a device that may never work." "Maybe," he said, eyes fixed on the circuits, "but trying gives us a chance." "Not trying gives us nothing." Those words struck her deeper than any blade. Not trying gives us nothing. Her empire had conquered stars, erased mistakes, perfected existence, and in doing so lost its reason to dream. The storm outside screamed, metal groaned, and then, suddenly, static. The transmitter flickered to life. Elias froze. "It's working," he breathed. Through the distortion, a voice broke through, mechanical, sharp, familiar. "This is Commander Vareth of the Ethran Dominion. Identify." Leora's heart raced. "Vareth, it's me. Queen Leora. I'm alive." The line went silent, then erupted in frantic commands. "Your Majesty, we've been searching the rim for weeks. Are you unharmed?" Her gaze flicked toward Elias. He smiled weakly, relief washing over his face. "You're going home," he said softly. But before she could reply, another voice came through, cold, bureaucratic. "Be advised, Majesty. Our readings show unauthorized life signatures near your beacon. Human origin detected. Termination protocol authorized upon arrival." Leora's blood turned to ice. "What?" Elias looked up, confusion in his eyes. "What did they say?" She couldn't answer. The transmission repeated, clearer this time. "Eliminate the human." Elias's expression shifted from confusion to calm resignation. "I guess they're not big on thank yous." Leora rose abruptly. "No, they can't. You saved my life." He gave a tired smile. "You don't need to protect me, Your Majesty. I knew what I was doing." She stepped closer, her voice trembling, not from fear but from something far rarer. "You think I will allow them to destroy what saved me? What changed me?" Her words carried fire. For the first time in her reign, her logic faltered under the weight of emotion. She activated her personal comlink. "Commander Vareth, hear me clearly," she said, her tone sharp as lightning. "If a single weapon is raised against the human, I will dismantle your ships myself." "Majesty," the voice stammered, "he's a relic, a contaminant." Leora's reply cut through the storm. "Then so am I." Outside, thunder cracked across the heavens as if the universe itself bore witness to her defiance. Elias stared at her, awe and disbelief mingling in his eyes. "You'd risk your empire for me?" She met his gaze. "You risked your life for me without even knowing who I was." For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain beat against the shelter like a heartbeat, steady, relentless, alive. Then Elias whispered, almost to himself, "Guess myths aren't what they used to be." And Leora, queen of logic and starlight, smiled through the chaos.
"No," she said softly.
"Sometimes they're better." The storm raged on, but inside that fragile shelter, something unbreakable had already begun to form. A promise neither the galaxy nor any empire could erase. The rescue fleet arrived within hours, sleek, Ethran warships gleaming like shards of frozen lightning, descending through the rim's turbulent clouds. Their precision was flawless, their silence absolute. To Queen Leora, it should have felt like salvation. But as the ships drew closer, all she felt was dread. Elias stood beside her at the ridge, his face unreadable. "They're your people," he said quietly. "You should go. And leave you to die?" She replied, her voice low but steady. He met her gaze, a faint smile at the corner of his lips. "It's not your fight, Leora. You have a whole empire to run." She looked away toward the horizon where her fleet shimmered like a blade ready to strike. "You're wrong," she said softly. "For the first time in my life, this is my fight." Moments later, armored Ethran soldiers landed, tall, radiant beings of translucent crystal, their faces expressionless. They bowed as they surrounded her, though their weapons remained trained on Elias. The lead commander stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we're honored to find you alive." Leora's tone was regal, composed. "He is under my protection." The commander hesitated. "That creature is dangerous, Majesty." The council ordered his immediate, "Enough!" Her voice cracked through the wind like thunder. "He is not a creature. His name is Elias." The soldiers froze, unsure how to respond. No Ethran queen had ever defied the council, ever questioned their command. The commander's crystal armor dimmed slightly. "Majesty, the council will not approve." Leora stepped forward, standing between Elias and the soldiers. Her silver eyes burned with something none of them had ever seen, defiance born of emotion. "Then let the council disapprove," she said. "I owe this human my life. If that is weakness, then I am guilty." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Their queen, the pinnacle of Ethran perfection, was protecting a being their history books labeled as extinct, primitive, inferior. Yet her presence, calm but fierce, made them lower their weapons. She turned to Elias. "You're coming with me." He blinked. Leora, they'll learn, she said sharply. And if they won't, they'll listen. The journey back to Ethra Prime was tense. The silence aboard her royal cruiser felt heavier than any gravity. Elias marveled at the ship's translucent corridors and glowing architecture. But what unsettled him most wasn't the technology. It was the way every Ethran they passed averted their eyes, as if looking at him was forbidden. In her private chamber, Leora removed her crown and set it on the table between them. Elias, she said quietly, my world will not understand you. They will see you as a virus, something that infects reason with emotion. He smiled faintly. I've been called worse. Her lips curved slightly, though her eyes shimmered with worry. You shouldn't joke about this. They will fear you. And fear leads to destruction. Elias leaned forward, meeting her gaze. Then teach them not to fear. You're their queen. The words struck deep. She had spent her life commanding obedience, but never teaching. She had ruled by logic, not example. Yet this human, fragile and scarred, spoke as though leadership was something entirely different. Compassion. When the ship landed on Ethra Prime, the palace council convened immediately. 1,000 advisors filled the hall, shimmering like prisms under starlight. At their center stood Elias, small, human, and impossibly brave. The High Chancellor's voice echoed coldly. This being cannot remain, Majesty. He is an infection to our order. Leora rose slowly, her presence commanding silence. Perhaps our order needs infection, she said. Gasps rippled through the chamber. She continued, her tone fierce yet calm. You call him primitive, yet he saved me when no machine or soldier could. You call him weak, yet he endures without fear. You call him flawed, but perhaps it is flaw that makes life beautiful. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting, Majesty, that emotion has value? I'm not suggesting it, Leora said, her voice like crystal striking steel. I'm declaring it. The room erupted in whispers and outrage. For the Ethran, this was heresy. For Leora, it was truth finally spoken aloud. And through the chaos, Elias stood silently, watching a queen of logic become something far more dangerous and extraordinary, a leader with a heart. As the council's uproar grew, Leora turned to him and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, Let them rage. Empires are loudest right before they learn to listen. That night, for the first time in her reign, Queen Leora felt something new beneath the endless glow of her world's crystal skies, hope. The rebellion began with whispers. In the grand cities of glass and starlight, where reason was law and emotion was sin, those whispers spread like cracks through crystal. The queen has fallen to human influence. She feels, she dreams. For the Ethran, it was a scandal. For Leora, it was liberation. Elias stayed close to her, though he could feel the tension wherever he went. Eyes followed him down every corridor. Guards spoke in hushed tones, afraid that proximity to the human would make them unpure. He didn't flinch. He'd survived worse things than hatred. One night in her private chamber, Leora stared out across her city. Towers of translucent stone shimmered in ordered perfection, yet she felt none of the peace that symmetry promised. They despise you, she said softly. Elias chuckled from his seat beside the console. I've been unpopular before. I don't think you understand, she murmured. They see you as contamination. I defied our highest council for you. I risked everything. He met her gaze, calm and unwavering. Then let me help you fix it. Leora turned sharply. You can't. You're one man against an empire. Elias smiled faintly. You'd be surprised what one human can do. He wasn't exaggerating. For weeks he had been studying their energy networks, mapping their inefficiencies. When he discovered the Dominion's central power core, an unstable relic sustaining billions, he nearly laughed. This thing's ready to blow, he told her, tapping the display. You're sitting on a ticking sun, she frowned. Our engineers claim it's flawless. Then your engineers never learned humility, he said quietly. Systems like this collapse under their own perfection. The irony wasn't lost on her. Together, they began working, Leora lending her authority to gather data, Elias providing the intuition of someone who felt his way through problems instead of calculating them. Night after night, they stood side by side, tracing lines of code and energy flow, their fingers occasionally brushing as they leaned over the same console. Each touch sent a strange shiver through her, a warmth she didn't understand but didn't want to lose. As the days passed, the rebellion's shadow grew. The High Chancellor's forces were amassing outside the capital. Her advisors begged her to hand over the human to restore purity. Leora refused every plea. "He is not my weakness," she told them. "He is my proof that strength comes from choice." One evening, Elias set down a datapad and looked at her with quiet seriousness. "Leora, if this core goes unstable before we stabilize it, it'll vaporize half your planet. I can stop it manually, but I'll have to do it from inside the chamber." Her heart froze. "No, you won't. It's the only way." She stepped closer, anger flashing through the fear. "You think I brought you here to die?" He shook his head. "I think you brought me here to help you live." For the first time, her composure broke. "Elias, I can't—" She stopped herself, breath trembling. "I can't lose you," he smiled, soft and human. "You won't, just promise me something." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What?" "Promise me you'll keep fighting for them, even when it hurts, even when they don't deserve it." Her throat tightened. "Why would I promise that?" "Because that's what humans do," he said, his voice fading into something gentler. "We fight for what could be, not just what is." Outside, alarms began to blare. The rebellion had reached the palace gates. Fire lit the horizon as crystal towers began to fall. Leora looked out across her burning world, her empire of light now cracking under its own perfection. "You could flee," Elias said softly, pulling on his suit. She shook her head. "I owe them truth." "And you—" She looked at him, eyes glistening. "You owe me that promise," he managed a small smile. "Then I'll keep it." Before she could answer, an explosion thundered through the city. The power core had begun to overload. He turned toward the door, determination etched across his face. "Elias," she called out, voice breaking. He paused just long enough to meet her eyes. "You once said humans were myths," he said softly. "So let me prove we were real." And then he was gone, vanishing into the roaring light of the storm, the same kind of storm that had first brought them together. Leora stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, torn between the crown she'd worn her whole life and the single human who had taught her what it truly meant to live. The citadel trembled as the overload spread through the power grid. Streams of energy arced across the skyline, turning the capital's beauty into a storm of fire and glass. Alarms echoed through the palace halls and soldiers ran in chaos. But amid the noise, Queen Leora moved with a single purpose. "Seal the lower sectors," a guard shouted. "No," she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. "Open the reactor gates." "He's down there." The guards froze. "Majesty, that's suicide." She met their eyes, unflinching. "Then I will die as your queen," feeling. And with that she ran. Down the endless crystalline corridors she went, her steps echoing through the trembling halls. The deeper she descended, the dimmer the light became, until only the faint blue glow of her veins illuminated the path. She could feel the core's pulse beneath her feet, wild and erratic, like a heart on the edge of collapse. When she burst through the final door, the sight stole her breath. Elias stood at the center of the reactor chamber, surrounded by surging currents of raw plasma. His body trembled from the radiation, but his hands moved with fierce precision across the control console. Every few seconds, arcs of energy lashed across the room, scorching the metal floor. "Elias," she cried. He turned, eyes bright despite the chaos. "You shouldn't be here." She stepped forward, shielding her face from the sparks. "I told you, you're not dying here." He tried to smile, even as pain racked his body. "You said humans were extinct. Guess I'm proving we're hard to kill." Her chest tightened. "You think this is bravery?" She shouted over the roar. "This is madness." He coughed, still smiling. "Maybe, but sometimes madness is just love in a louder language." That word, love, hit her like a strike of light. Her kind had no word for it anymore. It had been erased, labeled obsolete, irrational. Yet here it was, alive in his voice, burning through logic like sunlight through crystal. A sudden explosion rocked the chamber, hurling her to the ground. When she looked up, Elias was struggling to stand, one hand on the console. The stabilizer was failing, its containment rings flashing red. "I can fix it," he rasped. "I just need more power." Leora rose, her mind racing. Her body glowed brighter, too bright. She could feel her own life energy stirring, ready to burst. Etherian bodies were energy-born. She could feed the stabilizer, but it would drain her completely. She looked at him, heart pounding. "Elias, if I merge my core with the stabilizer, it will work." His head jerked up. No, you'll die. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. You once said a promise keeps you alive. Let me keep mine. He shook his head violently. Leora, please, don't. But she placed her hand over his, her touch radiating with light. You gave me something my people lost, hope. Now I'll give it back to them. He tried to pull away, but she held firm. Don't you dare start quitting now, she whispered, smiling faintly through tears. Then she turned to the reactor, and her entire body began to glow. The chamber filled with light so pure it felt alive. Streams of crystal energy flowed from her chest into the core, merging with the unstable plasma. The walls shuddered as the overload began to stabilize, the violent pulse slowing, smoothing, breathing. Elias watched helplessly, tears streaking through the dust on his face. Leora, stop! She looked at him one last time, her eyes soft, peaceful. Now you'll see, she said, what emotion can build. The light engulfed her, fierce, blinding, beautiful, then silence. When the glow faded, the storm was gone. The citadel stood still, saved. The core pulsed steadily once more, but at its base Elias found her, collapsed, her once radiant form dimming, her energy spent. He fell to his knees beside her. No, no, no! His voice cracked. You said humans don't quit, remember? So don't you start either. Her eyes fluttered open, faint and glassy. You could have kept your promise, she whispered. Now let me keep mine. He gripped her hand tightly, his tears falling onto her skin, where they shimmered like tiny stars. And as her light began to fade, Leora, the queen who never believed in emotion, did something no Ithran had done in 1,000 years. She smiled. Her final whisper trembled through the quiet chamber. If this is weakness, then may my people never be strong again. Then her glow faded, leaving behind not emptiness but warmth, a warmth Elias could still feel, pulsing faintly against his palm, as though the light itself had learned to love. When the light of Queen Leora faded, the capital entered a silence deeper than vacuum. For the first time in generations, the Ithran world stood still, not from command but from grief. Elias sat beside her resting form, his human hand still wrapped around hers, unwilling to let go. The air was thick with the fading shimmer of her energy, a soft golden glow that pulsed once, twice, and then stilled. He didn't know how long he stayed there. Hours, maybe days. He only knew that the warmth beneath his palm eventually stopped. The hum of the reactor stabilized. The world was saved. But to him, it felt like the universe had gone quiet. When the guards finally found him, they didn't speak. No one dared to. They simply lowered their heads as he carried her body through the silent corridors of the citadel. The queen who never believed in emotion now became the heartbeat of a world that had forgotten how to feel. The weeks that followed blurred into ritual. Her people mourned her in ways they'd never known before. Some wept, some built monuments, some sang in voices that cracked. The Ithran had never sung before. Elias helped rebuild what was left of the reactor, but his real work began far from the machines. He told stories. To the children who gathered around the palace steps, he spoke of Leora, not as a ruler of stars, but as someone who learned what it meant to care. He told them how she'd faced death not for logic, not for empire, but for love, the word that once made her flinch, and every time he spoke, he saw the change. The once cold faces of the Ithran began to soften. They smiled. They touched hands. They began to feel. Soon songs about the Queen of Light spread through the city, echoing across the crystal domes and through the deep corridors of the mines. Her name became a promise, a symbol, a quiet prayer whispered between worlds. But Elias, he carried her memory in a quieter way. Every night he returned to the balcony of the palace, the place where she had once asked, "Why do you humans risk so much for so little?" Now he would look up at the stars and whisper back, "Because sometimes the little things save everything." He still wore the old badge from his crashed ship, polished and worn. On the back he'd carved her initials with a trembling hand. One evening, as the twin moons rose, a soft voice echoed behind him. Human. He turned. It was a young Ithran girl, no more than 12 cycles old, her skin faintly glowing with pale light. She held a small orb in her hands, the last fragment of Leora's core. "She left this," the girl said. "It still hums when you're near. Elias took it gently. The orb pulsed once, warm and faint, like a heartbeat. His throat tightened. He looked down at the girl and smiled. Keep it safe. It's not just light, it's her dream. The girl tilted her head. Dream? Yes, he said softly. The dream that one day every star will feel. Years passed. Humans and Ethrin rebuilt the world together. Ships bearing both banners traveled to the far reaches of space, not to conquer, but to heal. And in every ship, on every hull, a single phrase was engraved in both human letters and Ethrin runes. Light feels. Love endures. Elias grew old, but he never left the capital. On his final day, he returned to the reactor chamber, the place where she'd changed everything. He stood before the glowing core, now gentle and golden. The energy shimmered like a living thing. He placed his hand upon it, whispering, I kept my promise. The core pulsed once, brighter than before, and for the briefest moment, he swore he heard her voice. Then rest, my human hero. He smiled through his tears. See you in the light? Leora, and as his eyes closed, the core flared, bathing the entire citadel in radiant warmth. Witnesses later said that for one whole minute, the sky above the capital turned to living gold, and two figures appeared in the light, hand in hand walking toward the stars. In time, the story of the queen and the human became more than legend. It became the foundation of a new age. An age where logic and love lived side by side, where stars didn't just shine, they felt. And on the anniversary of her sacrifice, every Ethrin world dimmed its lights for one heartbeat.